So we're back with another glossary video. This time we are talking about Abac, and we're joined by Dave Matthews and Aaron Fox from Arctis. And with these videos, we try and bring you sort of conversations around the latest trends in cybersecurity, and that's why Abac is something that we haven't really covered previously on these videos, but it is something that is quite important. So I think to get it started, we obviously said we've got Dave and Aaron. So, essentially, Dave, if you want to explain what is Abac.
Sure, thanks, Johnny. Yeah, so ABAC is attribute-based access controls. Um, Now, you might be familiar with role-based access controls, which is the traditional approach where we look at security groups, permissions on files and folders, and other data objects and similar there. And with role-based access, we're looking primarily just at the role of the individual, the permissions on the account, and similar there. With ABAC, we're actually looking at attributes both that apply to the content itself, so the data itself, and the user attributes. So when I talk about content attributes, I'm talking about the likes of of course, the permissions, the location of the document or file we're looking to access. We can be talking about content sensitivity. So if we've provided some form of classification, perhaps we've identified that using certain tools that we have when the data is created, or we're scanning and applying that data later using Microsoft Information Protection or similar labels there. And then you've also got other attributes such as the author, the security group that the user was from, who created that, and similar. So those make up content attributes. ABAC also looks at user attributes. So when we're talking about user attributes, we're talking about my permissions, my security clearance within the organization. Now, that security clearance may be based on my role, may be based on my competency with sensitive data and similar there. And then we're also looking at device. So am I coming in from a recognized authorized device? What software am I using? Is it a recognized browser that I'm attempting to download the file with? What location am I coming in from? Am I coming in on a secure network, a VPN connection? Am I logged in directly to the office, or am I logging in remotely? Perhaps I'm coming in from a Starbucks or a coffee shop down the road, or even am I logging in from a geographically separate location from where I'm expected? I'm outside of the UK. I'm actually logging in from Eastern Asia or similar there. Those are some of the attributes there for the user. So when we talk about ABAC, we're talking about the content and the user attributes, bringing those together, and that gives us some context around the accessibility of the data itself. To give you an example of that in practice, right now I'm logged in via a company laptop and I'm connected using a VPN. So I have access to files and folders that I'm authorized to see. Some of this will contain sensitive data around our organization. But what happens is after this call, perhaps I head down the road to my coffee shop, I take my phone and I want to catch up just on some of those documents that I was reviewing. So I open this up on my phone while I'm waiting for my coffee to be brewed. What happens, of course, is I'm now connected via an Android device. Perhaps it isn't recognized. I'm using the Google software that was installed on that device, so that isn't recognized. I'm logged in from a public location, could be 5G. I could be using the public Wi-Fi there, and of course, being in a public location means I'm also perhaps surrounded by people that I'm not actually familiar with, and so we might have some concerns over who could be looking over my shoulder. In that case, what ABAC can do is we can actually change the visibility of what I can see. You know, what can I still see all 50 files in the folder that I was accessing from the home office, or am I now restricted just to open perhaps the 5 files that haven't been classified as sensitive that are considered safe for public consumption? Um, and with ABAC, you can also take a look and say, well, let's apply some separate controls here. Let's allow Dave access to these files, but now they're only visible in read-only mode. Perhaps we're going to change some of the controls around that. We're going to apply dynamic watermarks, or even if I download this to my device, we're going to apply some encryption so this data is protected at rest, regardless of what other software is installed on my own personal device.
Great. I think that's a really important thing to consider, especially with the sort of shift to remote working we've seen over the last 2 years. I'm sure people are fairly fed up of hearing about the shift to hybrid working and remote working, but it's still an important topic to consider. Especially I think moving beyond the pandemic, hopefully if we ever transition out of it, we will see remote working being more of an option in the long term, not because it's forced. Hopefully more it's more of an option for businesses. They see it's a cost saving solution, more provide people with more flexibility. I guess ABAC just covers the security issues around that. Anything to add on that, Aaron, at all?
Not really, no. I think I'd just sort of summarize it by saying exactly as Dave pointed out there, that what you're really doing is combining user and content attributes to determine not only can somebody access it, but how do they access it, where do they access it from, and all those various things. So it's all about granular policy enforcements that you don't get with the traditional things like role-based access, where it's kind of one-dimensional and it's understanding of who's trying to do something and why they're trying to do it.
And do you see any particular sort of industries at all that should probably have an ABAC policy in place more than others, or is it something you'd recommend to everyone?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think really when you look at where ABAC comes from, it's all about understanding and mitigating risk. And so any industry where they are particularly exposed to certain risks that could be specific in nature. So if you say pharmaceutical or research companies, or also if you look at it from a financial legal perspective, they tend to be the sweet spot, I would say. But equally, when you look at perhaps smaller organizations or ones that aren't specifically highly regulated, which are the ones that always get spoken about, you look at, say, HR information, for example. It doesn't matter what industry you're in, if HR data is exposed and by that, perhaps a disciplinary document that's being worked on or somebody's salary information, if that gets leaked to somebody else in the organization, that has massive ramifications. And so really it's more about understanding where the risk comes from to sensitive data, and then thinking of specific examples where ABAC can help to apply the relevant policies, as opposed to the sort of traditional way of looking at data security, which is focusing all attention or resources on the highly regulated sectors of the market.
Okay, so with that, is it scalable? Can you choose how many policies you have in place? How does that look? So compare, say, a non-profit charity or education sector who potentially have a more restricted budget and different needs compared to, like you say, a finance or a legal firm who have much more personal sensitive business critical information. How does that look in terms of putting it in place?
Yeah, it's a great question. And actually, when you look at the way that the attributes are factored into this policy, because essentially it's just an access control methodology. And so whether you make that very simple and very specific to certain use cases, or whether you make the rules more general, or very, very detailed, are completely up to the organization that we work with. And I think the interesting thing that we find often is that there's certain government entities that we work with that we would expect to have very, very granular, detailed ABAC policies in place, and they often have the most simple ones because it's just focused at one use case. And so I think what we tend to find is that in the organizations that don't have specific regulations or specific scenarios in which they need to apply rules, they tend to have more generic things. So it's more an understanding of who's trying to access it, where they're accessing it from, what device they're connected to, geographically what location they're in, and those various things. And you can kind of use those as a generic policy that can be applied across the board to detect on something obvious. Dave used the example a minute ago. If somebody was accessing something from the wrong geographical location, that's not a specific example, and it doesn't really matter what you're trying to access. If you're meant to be based in London and you're trying to access this from let's not pick on anybody. If you say New York or Singapore or whatever it might be, then anywhere outside of London is incorrect. And so we can pick up on those things. And so I think the job for us really is to determine, based on the companies that we're working with and the specific use cases they have, the best way to deploy this in the way that is scalable, and obviously with the quickest time to value.
Okay, and then if say I was using Arctis is it a platform that I'd see this information from? How does that work? Do you get a notification when something triggers that's outside of the norm, if you like, the expected behavior? How does that look from your side?
Yeah, so with Arctis specifically, it's actually a good question. So architecturally, it sits as a proxy between a user and tenant. So when somebody's using the platform, say for example in Teams and SharePoint, the actual user experience is not altered. There's no requirement for any agent-based deployment. So there's no extra requirement on the end user to actually do anything. And actually, better still, when you look at this from say file shares. If our policy or the customer's policy that we're enforcing has determined that this person shouldn't access a particular document, they don't even see the document exists within the file share. And so you actually get the security benefit of people only accessing things they should access. But also you get the efficiency benefit in the sense that if they saw a document and they couldn't access it, the first thing they do is email their IT team to say, why has this happened and what do I need to do to get access to it? And obviously sets off a chain of events that causes everybody a headache and ultimately results in no access being granted anyway.
Mhm.
And so we kind of streamline that by just making it so that they don't see the document at all if they shouldn't be accessing it. So from the user experience, it's actually far improved because because of the way it's deployed, they don't have to do anything extra. And B, we only give them visibility of what they can actually see and edit. And so it's very clear to the user in that instance what they can and can't do. And I think just one point I'd add to that is that back to my earlier point about Abac being kind of a mechanism to help understand and mitigate risk. When you look at actual data loss incidents, and we tend to take information from the ICO, obviously being based in the UK, what you find is that the three main causes of data loss incidents are human error, malicious insiders, or obviously external people trying to hack in and steal data. We often focus on hackers and malicious insiders because obviously the story is a bit more interesting. It's very James Bond-esque in certain scenarios. But actually, when you look at it in practice, 88% of data loss incidents are caused by human error. And I'd emphasize the word error. So that's, emailing the wrong attachment or adding the wrong recipient, or even printing something off and forgetting to pick it up from the printer. All honest, simple mistakes. I'm sure all of us on this call and everybody listening has made a mistake like that at some point in their life. And so really by having these ABAC controls in place, what you're doing is protecting the user from making those mistakes. And so they can more confidently go about their day-to-day jobs and work with sensitive data in a manner in which they're not concerned that they're going to be doing something wrong.
I'm very glad you said that. Obviously, our sort of slogan is work with confidence, and having that security in place to give you the confidence to focus on what it is you're trying to do with your J job without worrying about, am I going to get something wrong? So taking that possibility for mistakes is massively important. Absolutely. Dave, anything to add on that before we wrap up?
Yeah, absolutely, Johnny. Just adding sort of to what Aaron was saying there about how the platform itself works is, it either sits within your Office 365 environment as an Azure resource group, or it can sit on premise as a Windows service. It's working as a layer of security between the user and the data. So you can use rules and controls to redirect users through the secure gateway, which then becomes a lens through which they're able to see and access the data. And really, it's all managed through security policies that basically define who should have access to this data. And once they have access, what should they be able to do? The platform itself doesn't change any of the permissions or policies that you might already have in place. So for many organizations, they've spent perhaps years, refining their data access policies, permissions on files and folders and other objects within their environment. This platform doesn't come in and change that. Rather, we take information from those solutions and from those integrations that they already have, and then we apply those to the security policies here. And again, you don't have to switch it on for everyone all at once. It can also be just enabled perhaps to start with guest access, then you start applying it to your user base and extending out the controls from that point. It's very fast and easy to deploy. And of course, all of the activity itself is also being audited. So if there are any incidents, anything that should not be happening, then you are able to trigger off alerts and be notified that there's something untoward going on here. Perhaps you want to have a closer look at it.
That's going to be my next question. How long does it take to introduce a new policy? Say you've got a new starter, or your team's going from being UK based only to start traveling. How long does it take to install sort of new policies?
Very straightforward. I mean, if you've ever configured rules within Outlook, for redirecting emails once they hit your inbox, you pretty much can drive this platform as well. We've got rules ready to go out of the box, a number of different policies that are set up, so you can also take those, duplicate them, copy them, and modify them to suit your own purposes. But in terms of actual deployment, I'm talking, a couple of hours. We're not talking days or weeks to get this up and running. And like I said, you can turn it on and start with a light touch for your external users, and then start to refine those controls as you educate the users to the changes that are coming in as well.
Cool, fantastic. Well, thank you very, very much both of you for your time this afternoon. I guess any questions, you can reach out to us at Threat Protect or Arctis, and if you want to find out more information, I'm guessing you guys can do some sort of demonstration of the platform if that was requested.
Absolutely, of course.
Perfect.
Happy to jump on a call.
Fantastic. Well, thank you both, and thank you for watching.